Here's where I cut the fiberglass to the shape of the wing, so that this way when you set the wing on it, it'll fit perfect right to the actual, well, these are the uprights, and then on the horizontal wings I'm just going to do the front side of the wing, and then I'll show you later how I epoxy that together. Now here I'm going to show you I use the Divinycell, and it's a 1/4 inch thick, and I glass these in the mold. But if you get a wing set from me, epoxy, this is actually carbon fiber, you can still glass it yourself using Divinycell. And what I recommend is just use some clamps, like 1, 2, 3 clamps, and not real strong ones, just enough to just get you a nice, bond there. And I always use 2-part epoxy. You can use West Systems epoxy. You can use a slow epoxy. I always use slow, especially when I'm gluing stuff like this. Gives you plenty of time and to work with everything. Gives you a real good bond. And the other real important thing you can probably see on this wing too is anytime that you're doing this, you want to sand the edges. That's going to be that you're going to wet out in fiberglass too. So that's real important. Now you see the tape, the yellow tape on here. The reason I do that is I'm going to show you in the next part of this video. I'm going to use Cabil. Just put a light little mix up Cabil with slower resin. You mix the your 2-part epoxy. You mix your resin first, your resin with the slow hardener. Mix that up, and then you start adding Cabil to it. And the Cabil, what that does is it thickens it, and the more Cabil you add to it, gives you the thickness that I like creamy peanut butter. So back to the tape. The reason I put these tape on here is because when I take this off of here, this is my outline, approximately 3/4 of an inch all the way around. I'll just do that. I'll set the fiberglass on top of it, then I'll wet the fiberglass out. I will wet the edge on the inside, and then set this on here, and then I'm going to put a little weight, one on each side, and I'll show you that in the next part of the video as well too. So here you kind of see, here's the layout. Here you can see I got everything laid out. I got the Cabil mixed up, and with the Cabil, you can see it's like I said, creamy peanut butter. And just so you know, I get one of my suppliers that use US Composites, and it says right there Cabil. You can get it all different amounts of that. So okay, we're gonna take all the fiberglass off of here, and I'm gonna, next part of this video, I'll show you how I put the Cabil, put a thin layer of that down. And again, the reason I use the Cabil, it just helps hold it in place when I put the glass down, the fiberglass on top of it. I don't like to wet the fiberglass. I want it wet all the way through. So the Cabil underneath is wet, and then putting that down, then it wets out real good. It needs a nice smooth surface because you're going to be gluing these 2 surfaces together. So it can be nice and smooth, easy to get together. So, okay, there we go. Let's go to the next part. You can see I went ahead, put the Cabil on these here, and I'll do the last one. Like I said, I just get about that much, and then you just simply spread it out. And I do make it wider, and the good part about tape is just gives you good guidelines because to do this, and I make them approximately about a 3/4 inch to an inch wide on here. And it's okay, you can use up a lot of this, just make it smooth. So there you go. That's basically how you do it. You'll probably have extra Cabil left over. Use a little acid brush, and next thing I'm going to do is lay the fiberglass on top of these, and then I'm going to wet them out. Here you can see I wet out the fiberglass using the acid brush, mixed up the epoxy resin, And then the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to wet out the edges, just the edges. You'll see it, as you see, I sanded this, and I'm just going to wet the edge, because when you put this down, you want to just make sure it's wet on wet, and then I'll put the weight on top of it, and that's it. You let this cure. I let it go 24 hours. Here you can see they're all wetted out. They're sitting on the fiberglass. I have the weights on them. For the horizontal wing, you can see there's 3 weights in the front. These weights are not heavy, just enough to make sure you got a good bond. And of course, these wings were already cleaned up and fitted together before I get ready to epoxy them and do this procedure. Parts are all cured. I removed them from the glass. I just generally just take like a putty knife, go underneath it, and just pop them up. They come off pretty simple. You can see I cleaned these up. The edges are all cleaned up. And you flip it around this side here, and you'll see how it's like kind of wide here. I just take a Dremel with a cutoff wheel, and I leave about 1/4 inch, and I just trim all this excess off of here. So that's the next step. This one here, I left it on here. I use a belt sander to sand the edges on that. And you can see on the horizontal wing. Now on the horizontal wing, I just do the front. And then generally what I do with the horizontal wing is I mount the uprights first, fit those to the boat, and then afterwards I fit the horizontal to these wings. So I'll show you that, because what I'm going to do next, like I said, is trim everything up and then show you how I epoxy these together. Is there's tape on the hull. The reason I put the tape on here, any glue or anything that drips down, the wings won't get glued to here. They'll just pop right off of this. And if you can, the tape I have, this isn't heavy tape, but sometimes if you get heavy duty tape, it's a little bit nicer. It goes on a little bit easier. So, and one more thing, take a look and see. The bottom one is sanded and the top one is not. You can see how this one's shinier and this one's dulled out. You can use like 100 grit. All you want to do is just lightly just scratch it, and then you're ready to epoxy them together. When you epoxy the wings together, I suggest, when you have whatever mount you're going to use, on this particular one is my SG 118 hull, my 1/8 scale. You do the same thing on a gas scale. What I suggest is putting it on the actual boat. And the reason being, let me hold this better for you guys so you can see. You can see how close the foam is together. Well, when you put approximately an 1/8 inch gap in there, this way it'll conform perfectly right on there. So when you slide the wing over that carbon fiber wing mount, what it'll do is it'll definitely give you a nice shape and fit it right to the boat. So it's not glued yet, but I'm just showing you this is how I would clamp it. Let it sit overnight. I will be making a part 2 video with the horizontal wing. So the first part with this video, what I was showing you is to make just a flange on your wings, so that when you glue them together, instead of trying to get that little tiny spot together to glue it, you got a nice little 1/4 inch flange, and you can get it together real good and make a real good joint and keep them light. The idea when you're doing these wings, try and keep in mind to keep them as light as possible and as strong. The Divinycell, the 1/4 inch Divinycell that I use, the reason I like it is it's nice and strong, but it's flexible enough. You can use polyester resin with it, epoxy resin. I mainly use epoxy resin. And the idea of this, cutting this to shape, or just cutting it, fitting in here, gluing it on here, the reason for that is that, you know, like I said, whatever, if you use a piece of aluminum or something that you mount in your hull, this is approximately about 1/16 thickness, maybe a little bit bigger, but that's really all you need. You know, I like carbon fiber because it's light, it's really strong. It's got a lip on the bottom, so you can glue at the bottom, glue at the top. This is what I use when I build my hulls. So, and again, what you want to do is keep this as light as possible. The other thing too, before you start this project, is you want to, I get these, you know, out of the mold and I just clean up the edges on them, but you really want to get them fitted a lot better. Clean these all up, clean these edges up and everything, get them fitted really the way you want. You can even, on some of the, on some boats, they run them, they make this actually to a point in the back, and you can just sand this down real tight in the back, bring that edge down, but just keep, you know, sanding and fitting them together. And as you can see, there's quite a pretty good sized gap in there, and that's why I like putting this in. It works as two things. One is it's nice and strong on the bottom, it fills it in, it's flotation for if these come off. A lot of you use the nylon screws. I use 440 nylon screws on the bottom, and you know, so once that thing's mounted, you slide it over. It's a real nice fit on there, and it works out real good. Now, when you go to the horizontal wing, you're going to notice that I have, you know, there's an edge on here. Some of my wings don't come without an edge on it. The newer ones do. This is a gas scale wing. It's a little bit bigger, and but what I generally recommend is when I'll show you in the next video, when I'm mounting the horizontal wing, when this is setting up on here like this, and people ask me angles, you can look at paint plans from Roger Newton, all his that he did, all those paint plans. You can look and see they'll generally have a little bit of angle on them. You can look at photos, but generally a 2 to 3 degree. You may even cut this off of here, and when you're doing that, you can put a piece of wood in there and put some blind nuts in there. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Like I said, once I do the second video, we'll show you how I do that. Again, I like the Divinycell, like put a strip in there or any foam. Like I said, I use this, it's light, it's strong. I would do about a 2-inch strip all the way down the center, and you know, just epoxy it in there. Again, keep mindful to it that when you're doing that, that you're not going to change the shape of this too much, you know. And the one last thing too with this is in the first part of this video I showed you, I put a piece across here about, again, it's a 1/4 inch thick, and what I do in the back piece here, again, you can sand this down really flat, and you can just lay a piece of when you're gluing the two together, you could just literally put a piece of, like, I use 6 ounce because it's just heavy enough. Put a piece in there and glue it between the two of them. After that cures, and then just sand it flush. Actually, if you stick it out a little bit, it'll bring you more of a little bit of a point to the back of it. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Again, I'll do a second video for the horizontal wing. I hope that guys give you a pretty good idea how to put this thing together. And if you get any questions, just email me, info@rcboatcompany.com. Thank you.